Now we want to take a look at some different methods that appraisers can use to estimate cost. Obviously, this all goes back to the cost approach to value, which as a real estate agent, you're not going to be dealing with. But obviously, this is something appraisers do have to deal with. And if you think about it, trying to figure out how much would it cost to build a building. That's a lot of work that's going to go into that potentially. Well, how do you do that? There are different methods that we're going to look at real quick to help estimate what the cost would be to construct a building. Now, for us as real estate agents and for test purposes, again, we're not trying to get into the weeds. Again, we're not appraisers. So really, this little section here dealing with these methods of cost, it's really just definition. I would just be familiar with definitions. You got, for example, we start with the index method. And it said this method, it applies a factor, and the factor we're going to be dealing with here typically would be things like inflation. But it would apply a factor representing construction cost changes up to the appraisal date to the original construction cost of the building. So, what something cost a year ago, it may not be what it would cost today, right? Because there's inflation. The cost of material could go up. It could potentially go down. But really, the main thing I would pay attention to here, with the index method, it's a way for the appraiser to adjust the original cost of the construction to inflation, or at least for inflation. And that's what we're dealing with there. We're adjusting the original construction cost for the inflation factor. Okay, that's what they call index method. All right. The next method is the square footage comparison. I will tell you, this is by far the most common for appraisers to use. This is it. This is by far the most common. But obviously here it says we're determining the sales price per square foot of comparable sales. That's what we do with the sales comparison approach. Now, again, to try to figure out some of the cost here, a huge advantage that an appraiser would be using are like cost manuals, and there are different companies out there that will produce what we call a cost manual, where you could look up how much would it cost to build a garage, what would it cost to build a deck, different components like that, and it breaks it down. It's a very comprehensive cost manual, and probably one of the most common nationwide is, they call it the Marshall and Swift construction cost manual. We use that a lot. I will tell you, it is very expensive, and they have to redo it every year, obviously, because costs change. So this is a very expensive book, or you can get it automated on the computer if the appraiser chooses. But anyway, when it comes to square footage comparison, I would remember this. This is the most common. This is the one appraisers like to use, and the reason it's so common is because we can obtain this cost manual to help develop the cost of each of the components within the house. So that's what we're dealing with the square footage comparison. And then, the next is what we call the quantity survey. And I will tell you, this is a very detailed, very complex method. But here, you're basically itemizing all the direct cost of the construction as well as indirect cost of the construction, for each component of the structure. This is a very time-consuming method. It's very complex, In fact, if you look at that second bullet there, it says this offers the most detailed and accurate estimate, there's no question there, of construction, but it's rarely used because it is so complex and it's very time consuming. It would take a long time to break down every single component of the house, itemize every single component. But that's what the quantity survey does. So again, it's just very complex, and for that reason, it's rarely ever used. But then the last of the methods to estimate costs is what we call the unit in place. It says here it's kind of a modification of the quantity survey, which we just talked about. Remember, we said the quantity survey is very complex. But here we're looking at, we add up what all the costs of each component would be, such as all the different material, the labor, stuff like that, as if it were already in place. And that's why they call it unit in place. So really the main thing I would just maybe remember about unit in place is, again, the second bullet, where it adds up costs for each component, such as labor, material, and so forth. So we know what the cost of each component is. We already have that, which is remember that now the quantity survey is when you're having to develop all these costs. But assuming we have these costs, then we can just add them all up, and that's what they're really talking about or dealing with the unit in place. So those are your 4 methods to estimate cost. Again, just be familiar with really some definitions. That's all you need to worry about.